Alright, so in this video we are going to look at what we did in class. We're going to make a animated platform that moves up and down, and we are going to make a platform that is triggerable as well. So, in this case, when Mario jumps on the platform, triggers the platform to move. Alright, to do either of those, we need to create what's called a blueprint, an actor blueprint, something that we can place assets within, and we can also place code within. This is the first time that we're making one of these from scratch. We had been using the character blueprint for our character, which is pretty much the same thing, except in this case we're making it from scratch. So let's make a new one. We're going to go to Add New, Blueprint Class, Actor. Actor is pretty much anything that you can put in a level. Let's call this Animated Platform BP for Blueprint. Just staying organized, double click it. And this should look kind of familiar. Right here we have the Viewport tab. Over here we have the event graph, which we put the blueprint code in. We haven't done anything yet here, so it's quite empty. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to click on the default scene root here and then go to my Add Component button. I want to add my platform to my level here. And I'm just using the default assets that are in the example project. So I'm going to type in paper sprite here because that's the type of asset that we're using here. Everything that we're doing with this example today could be done with 3D models as well, if that was more the direction you were going with your project. So I'm going to go paper sprite. And then over on the right side of this window here, we have a section called sprite, and this is where I want to pick the sprite that's actually going to be my platform in this case. I think the default sprite here is called ledge, so I'm going to pick that, zoom out here. Yeah, this is the default ledge that we've been playing around with in our level. I'm going to save this. Next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go to the event graph. The event graph's right here, the tab, and we're going to start adding some code here. So with paper sprite selected, so Unreal knows what we're referencing, I'm going to right click and type set, set relative location and rotation. You can see here it says set relative location and rotation, and then in parentheses it says paper sprite. That's because we have it selected over here, so it's actually going to create a reference for us automatically. Whatever's in parentheses here is what it's going to designate as its target. So click that. You see we get this window here, and this little reference to the sprite itself. Alright. Next thing I want to do is we're going to create two variables. So we're going to create a variable for starting point, we'll call it, I just click the plus button on variable to get this, starting point. And by default this is a Boolean variable, it's red. A Boolean variable is not what we want in this case. Booleans are sort of like true, false, on or off. They're really two sort of parameters that you can set. We want to go over to the right and change the variable point of this variable to vector, because we're dealing with XYZ coordinates. After we do that, we can go and create another variable, and let's call this ending point. And that's already yellow. Unreal Smart knows that we're making vectors, so we're probably going to keep making more. We want both of these to be vectors. Go ahead and compile those. And see over here on the right side, the default value has XYZ coordinates. For our ending point, let's set the Z ending point to, the Z coordinate for the ending point to 400. So the platform is going to begin at 0, Z, based on where we place it in the level. These are local coordinates, not world coordinates. So it's relative to the location of itself, where the beginning point that you put it in level is 0. Then, in this case, I'm setting my endpoint to 400. Let's drag both of these into our blueprint. And we're getting both of these variables, not setting them. Okay. And what we need is we need some sort of node to blend between the starting point and the ending point. So we don't snap to it, we just kind of smoothly fade between the starting point and the ending point. And to do that, we can use a node called lerp. Lerp stands for linear interpolation. It's a linear blend between an A and a B value. So we're going to put this in here, and move this stuff to the side a little bit. I'm going to wire up the starting point to A, the ending point to B, and I'm going to connect the output of the lerp to the set relative location and rotation. Organize a little bit. Okay, this is looking good. We need to create something that's going to control this alpha. The alpha is the value that controls the rate at which we blend between the A input here, our starting point, and the B input, our ending point. And to do that, we're going to create a timeline. So right-click the blueprint graph, type timeline. At the bottom here it says add timeline. Select that. And there's a lot of stuff here. In order to actually manage the timeline, we need to double-click it to go into it. And we can create a bunch of different tracks here. We want to create a float track. A float track would be a decimal-based track. A vector track would give us XYZ. Color track would give us RGB. We're creating a float track because we're setting time in this case. How long is it going to take our platform to go from the starting point to the ending point? So add a float track. The name right here, let's call this time, just to stay organized. To create keyframes here, if you've worked with any sort of program that does keyframes, After Effects, Premiere, whatever, keyframes function the same way in every software. So right-click here, we're going to add a keyframe. You can drag these things around. You can zoom in and out with your scroll wheel. I like to use these little windows right here if I'm trying to get precise values rather than dragging them around. So I want to set this first keyframe at 0 seconds, and I want the value to be 0. And then, how long do I want my platform to move? Let's say 3 seconds. So I'm going to right-click, add a new keyframe, and I'm going to say at 3, for 3 seconds, I want the value to be 1 or 100%. We're fading between 0% and 100%. If your keyframes get a little bit lost here, you can always use these little zoom icons to fit everything within. Holding down right-click, you can pan around the timeline. Right-click again, we're going to add our third and last keyframe, and we're just going to make this a symmetrical loop. So let's set the time to 6 seconds and set the value back down to 0. So our platform or our elevator is going to go up and then down over the course of 6 seconds. Now you might notice here that there's this work area crop right here. And that's because this length of this timeline has been set by default to 5 seconds. Since my keyframes are going to 6 seconds, I should make this length 6 seconds. If I make it shorter, it's going to get cropped off. If I make it longer, I'm going to have a little bit of dead time at the end. For this platform, I think it makes sense for us to have it loop. We want this to just be an eternally moving elevator. It's going up and down, up and down, up and down. I want this to loop, so I'm going to click the loop icon right here, and I'm going to click autoplay as well. I want this to start as soon as the level starts. And click save. Remember, this is a good time to click Control-Shift-S to save all. Go back to the event graph and check it out. right here, we have a new output on our timeline called time. It's a float value. I'm going to drag out from that and plug this into the alpha on the lerp. The timeline is now driving the lerp. I'm going to drag update into set relative location and rotation. And that should be good for that. Now we just need to go back to our level. And I need to drag my platform into the level. So just drag this blueprint, the animated platform BP, into your level. Since we're working with 2D, you see it's placed back in Z space a little bit. Rather than trying to eyeball it with dragging it this way, let's just go over to the details panel, and we know that everything is on 0 y-axis. So let's just put 0. Move this other platform out of the way. Moment of truth. Let's go ahead and try and play. And look at that. It's playing. Very cool. If I wanted to speed it up, slow it down, change how high or how low it goes, I could go back into the platform blueprint and change the timeline to change the speed, and change the starting point and ending points to change the beginning and ending point of the elevator. So that's how we make an animated platform. Well, one of the ways we can make an animated platform in Unreal. Now let's create an interactive platform. It's pretty much going to be the same way, but we can start from scratch again. I'm just going to go through it a little bit quicker. We're going to create another blueprint. It's an actor blueprint. I'm going to call this one Interactive Platform, BP. If you hear any yelling in the background, that is my 2-year-old daughter who's getting ready for bed. She is crazy, to say the least. All right, in the blueprint, click on default scene root again. I'm going to go and type in paper sprite. Click paper sprite. Go over to the right. Set the source sprite. I'm going to use that ledge again. Pull back here a little bit. All right, that looks good. And go to my event graph. Oops. Go to my event graph. I'm going to get the set, location, and rotation. Relative, not world, relative. Paper sprite, yes. Cool. This is identical to what we did before for the animated platform, but there is going to be a difference. Let's create a variable again, call this one a start. Remember, we want this to be a vector variable, so go over to the right, click the drop down for variable type, change that to vector. Let's create another one, call this one end. Compile that. Let's set the endpoint to be 400 again. Again, the endpoint it's up to you. The starting and end points depend on how high and how low you want your platform to go. Let's drag both of these things in. We want to grab that lerp again. So we're going to right click, lerp, lerp vector, not transform, not rotator, vector, because we have vector variables. We are lerping vector values. They're color coded yellow. Let's plug start into A, end into B, return value into the location. And now we need something to drive the alpha again. That's the timeline. Let's get timeline, add timeline here. I'm already going to connect the update to the input of set relative location and rotation. All right. I'll click on the timeline again. And this is going to be called time again. We're setting our keyframes, right click. First one's going to be 0. I'm just going to do the same thing over again. 0, value, time is 0, value is 0. Right click, this keyframe is 3. I'm going to have reached the apex of the elevator's height at 3 seconds. Value is going to be 1 for 100%. I'm going to scroll over, add a key. This is going to complete the loop at 6 seconds, and we're going to take the value back down to 0, so it's symmetrical. You don't necessarily have to have elevators that are symmetrical, but it makes sense to me. Usually the elevator goes back to the first floor if you hit the 1 button. So let's make the length of our timeline 6 again, because we don't want it to be cropped off. That looks good to me, looks good to me. Let's go back to our event graph. And this is pretty much where we ended up last time. We just need to connect the float value output of time from the timeline to the alpha input on the lerp. And now we have what we had last time. The difference this time is that we want to trigger this so that when we jump on this platform, it activates it. So we need to go back to the viewport on our platform and click on Paper Sprite, go to Add Component, and type in Box. We're going to add an invisible collision box that's going to sit on top of this platform that's going to detect when our character collides with it. So when our character enters this box, go ahead and scale this up. Remember, the scaling tools are right here, the movement translation tools are right here. You can use the spacebar to switch between them. And make this box so it catches your character within it. If you have different size platforms, you're going to have to size the collision box appropriately. Okay. After we have that, we can go back to the event graph. And with the box collision selected, that's just the default name, I want you to right click, and up top here it says Add Event for box and collision. And you see add on component begin overlap. Those are what we want. We want to begin overlap and we want to end overlap. We want two things. So we're going to get the begin overlap. We're going to put it right here. We're going to right click again. We're going to go back. Oh, helps if you have the thing selected that you're trying to do. Unreal narrows down the options in that case. This one we want end overlap. So when we stop colliding with that box, when we jump off of it, we're going to tell Unreal to stop doing something potentially. Or really, we could have when we jump off, anything can happen. It just sends out another signal, sends out another bang output. So let's connect the output from this overlap, begin overlap to play. So when we start overlapping the collision box, we're going to start playing the timeline, which moves our platform. And when we jump off, when we end overlapping the collision box, we are going to have it maybe just reverse, so it goes back to 0. There were some students in class that seemed to like that better, so let's try it, see what happens. Save, compile, good, go back to your main thing, drag the platform into the level. It's getting kind of messy here, I guess that's okay. Yeah, I'll move this one out of the way, replace it with this guy. Remember, you want to change the y-axis over here in the details back to 0, so it's all on the same plane since this is a 2D game. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if this works. Play. Jump on it. Oh, look at that. As soon as we get on it, it starts moving. And it's not looping. Maybe you want it to loop. In that case, you would want your timeline to be set to loop. So when we're jumping off, it goes back home. It's, if you want it to loop, you can change the timeline to set to loop. If you want to have your code stop the platform rather than reversing it, we can just take this to stop. I'm going to make this loop. Go into the timeline, click loop. Really depends on the type of thing that you want to happen, and it's going to depend on what you're trying to do. That's on you. Alright, so as soon as I jump on the platform, as soon as I jump off, it stops. Maybe that's cool, maybe that's a problem, because now I can't get back up there. Well, my game's poorly designed. I can't get back there. I'm screwed. Congratulations. Oh, I made it. Maybe I can have a huge jump. No. Alright, fail. Oh, well, there we looked how to do animated platforms and also interactive platforms. Hopefully that clarifies and this documentation is useful to anybody that needs help. All right, cool. Uh, Thank you.